Welcome to the Balance Protocol podcast. If you are looking to regain your health, get the most out of life, or even resolve a chronic disease that has been plaguing you for years, this is the place. During an era where countless people are feeling the weight of ill health and whose heads are spinning due to all the noise and confusion within the info space, Dr. Beck is here to cut through all that noise and misinformation, to bridge the gap between medicine, scientific research, and where everything should truly be centered within you. Backed with 2 decades of professional clinical experience, Dr. Beck applies a revolutionary systems biology called functional medicine, utilizing his powerful method called the Balance Protocol. Here, Dr. Beck will educate you on the root causes of disease, motivate you to take solid corrective actions in your life, and inspire you to reach the highest levels of well-being. He knows that at the end of the day, it is you, the patient, who holds the keys to your ultimate health and well-being. It's time for the Balance Protocol with Dr. Anthony G. Beck.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Balance Protocol podcast, Episode 1. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony G. Beck. Of course, this is Episode 1 of a continuing series of podcasts, and I hopefully we'll get to spend some time with each other on a frequent basis, at least once a week. But as things progress here, I have big plans for this particular podcast, and hopefully we'll get to be able to spend 2 or 3 days together a week. So here, basically, what I want to do is share with you my life's passion, my work, where I pour my heart and soul. Hopefully the point is to cut through all the noise and confusion that plagues the info space. There's so much conflicting information on health and well-being going on out there on the internet, and I know it makes my patients' heads spin. And every day of working with them in the clinic, they come and ask me, well, hey doc, I read this. What do you think about this? This person said this versus another person says that. How do we know the difference, of what's going on? It's out there on the internet versus what other doctors are telling us, people quoting scientific research and all that kind of fun stuff. Well, it's going to be my intention to bridge the gap between medicine, the scientific research, and of course, where everything should be centered, and that's you. And I'm going to do that through a powerful method that I have developed over a couple of decades, which I have come to call the Balance Protocol. This is a systemized approach utilizing a powerful systems biology called functional medicine to literally take things in your life and change them for the greater good, to help you develop the highest levels of well-being that you could possibly have. So, in a nutshell, I am here to educate, motivate, and inspire you. We're going to explore a lot of cutting-edge medicine, share with you some boring research, of course, but then put it in sensible terms to where you can apply it in your life and be empowered to actually thwart off the negative effects that might be out there on the internet, saying all these different things like we talked about earlier. So I'm going to bring 2 decades of clinical experience, thousands of patient encounters, learning, so much from my patients over the last couple of decades has really taught me the things that we really should be talking about and sharing with others who aren't necessarily in the know or have the motivation to go out there and make a change in regaining and capturing their health. So most importantly, you'll find the common thread in what we're going to be talking about with the Balance Protocol is you, the patient. That's what's really going to set this particular program apart from all the others. Is I'm going to make sure that we filter through that ever important need to be having an understanding of it's okay to accept yourself as a category of one. So I'm going to teach you how and why medicine, not what medicine. So many people these days, come and they talk to me about their diagnosis and they say it's my allergy or my fibromyalgia, or my rheumatoid arthritis. Like they've taken complete ownership of it. It's almost like a family pet. And I always ask them, I said, so you're referring to, say, your fibromyalgia or your rheumatoid arthritis. I said, I pick on them a little bit and say things like, well, do they get invited to the family outings? Do you take pictures with these? Because what happens is when you are given a particular diagnosis, you tend to accept it. And the more that you reinforce that particular named disease, the more it becomes entrenched and just issues so many tentacles in different parts of your life that make it very difficult for you to get rid of. And that's what I want to hopefully help you learn to do, is to relinquish these diagnoses that you have been given and what I call the name it, blame it, tame it game. So this is why so many patients come to me and tell me, well, wow, doc, that was fantastic. It's really good that we were able to spend, so much time with you. And if only I'd been able to do this with some of the other specialists and things that I've seen. And I just kind of nicely, ask them for a little get out of jail free card for their other clinicians, because they're just a part of today's medicine, which I think we can all agree really is not yielding the results that we want. It's a broken system. It's been in the news now for many months, and we're still trying to work it all out. And we'll talk about that more specific in the oncoming podcast. But I definitely sympathize with the individuals who are going to their physicians and they get to see them for 7.3 minutes. They only get one complaint. And virtually all the time what they end up doing is only leaving with a diagnosis, a name of a disease, and the approach to resolving that disease is to give you a little, white slip of paper that you now get to take to your pharmacy of your choosing and get some fancy molecule or medicine that is somehow going to, keep it at bay. Well, if you're like most people, you really realize that the game of just treating things and putting Band-Aids or the proverbial duct tape over the baby's mouth that's crying is not going to work. And it's probably why we have such a plague of chronic disease in this country. So today's healthcare model is certainly one that's not perfect. And I want to make sure that people understand that I think there's a tremendous amount of physicians out there that are good doctors. But one of the things I've heard, and it's a great statement, is that good is the enemy to great. And what I want to really help you do is not only learn on your own how to be able to resolve chronic diseases and things that have been plaguing you for so many years, but how to find clinicians and talk to them to encourage them to give you the best care that you deserve. So we want to take good doctors and make them great. So basically, here's your chance to effectually opt out of all that nonsense and learn how to correct and prevent a vast majority of what is the true root cause of why so many people are lacking well-being. And I'm going to teach you through this series how you can actually do that with very simple and powerful techniques that have been really lost over the years because people have been trying so many quick fixes and so many, throwing a pill at this, whether it be a medication or an herb or something of that nature. Well, we're going to cut through all that nonsense and really give you some solid information that you can use to apply in your life. So this is certainly the place you're going to learn to do all that, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I thought, with my first podcast, one of the requisites would, of course, to, introduce me professionally, give you that curriculum vitae consolidated version so you can kind of understand, where I'm coming from, what I bring to the table. So I'm going to briefly share with you my story, how I came to this passion that I've shared with you just a moment ago, and so you can kind of understand what made the man behind the method. So first and foremost, I'm a naturopathic doctor and a doctor of Oriental medicine / acupuncture physician. And here shortly, I'll be completing my doctorate in health sciences and integrative healthcare with a concentration in epidemiology and chronic disease. So I am a lifelong student and a lot of professional training, but I hold 4 national board certifications in all my related fields. I'm a member of over 10 professional medical associations, including being a sitting member on the American Association of Integrative Medicine. I currently practice as a licensed primary care provider in the state of Florida, where I maintain a private practice. So I've been practicing my fields now for over 20 years. And for at least the last 6, I've been traveling and have had the blessing of teaching and learning from hundreds of other doctors across the country in fields dear to my heart, which are, of course, functional medicine, clinical nutrition, and exercise physiology. But the most important thing is I'm a certified human being, a person just like you, a country boy at heart, and my life story is probably very similar to the vast majority of you that are listening. I grew up in North Carolina. Parents were divorced at age 5. My mom was from humble roots in Tennessee. My dad from even more humble roots and from West Virginia. And so I got a little country boy coming from both sides. We didn't have much growing up. I had 4 brothers, 2 sisters. I'm the youngest of those. And so the thing was for me is those of us who have grown from, humble beginnings can attest to there are a lot of things that we just didn't have. And one of them was actually we never really went to the doctor. When we got sick, we kind of, had home remedies. And if we broke something, I broke a bone or two when I was a young boy. But so, of course, you go and you handle that. But for the vast majority of things, we really tried to eat well and let the body do what it needed to do to kind of overcome colds, flus, bumps, and bruises. And one of the things that I like to do is give a lot of credit to my mom. She was a real estate agent, and she also moved into managing of hotel properties and resorts. So when I was a young boy, 10, 11 years old, I would go to work with her. And one of the things to keep me busy, she would actually pawn me off over into the kitchen, and they'd have me do things like chop vegetables and peel shrimp and a lot of fun stuff like that for me. I just felt so important and like, wow, this is really neat. So by the time I was 12, I actually got to start working in the kitchen, officially making a paycheck. Worked with a lot of wonderful chefs, and they kind of set me on that road to food and beverage management. So my first initial passion was food and really feeding the body. I got to really expand my knowledge in a lot of culinary or gastronomic schools of thought, if you will. And so after working for about 6 years in that field and working 12-hour days and having no fingernails from being in food all day and constantly washing them, I was coming to my year of graduation when I was 18, so it was 1989, and I was thinking, well, I don't really know if this is going to be the career for me going forward. So I love the fact that my father was in the Navy when way before I was born. He served in the Korean War, and I always had a very patriotic heart at nature, and I was actually graduated high school in Fayetteville, North Carolina, right there at good old Fort Bragg. So had a lot of time with military folks and my friends and family and stuff like that, and spending time there on bases. But I was, gleaning more towards the Navy. This was the time when, of course, Top Gun was coming out, and everybody wanted to be fighter pilots for the Navy. And of course, I have to humbly admit that was my story too. It really pulled me to it. I was a really independent person. I was living on my own by the time I was 17. Had a house that my parents moved out of and allowed me to stay there and continue to rent. And that was pretty awesome. So, I got a scholarship to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And then I was like, well, that's a little far from the water. I was really kind of a beach towhead, having been born in Wilmington, North Carolina, and always running off to the beach as much as I could. So I made a decision to actually forego that scholarship and go to Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, which I was a part of the ROTC program there for the Navy and the Marine Corps. So that was where my intended career path was going to go. So I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my dad in the Navy, but the only difference was he was a signalman, and I actually wanted to fly jets, or at least something with propellers. So it could have either been the props or the helos. It didn't matter to me as long as I was in the air. Just had a fascination with flight. But as a lot of us can attest to, things in life just don't always go exactly the way we intend them to. And love usually comes in and shakes it up a bit. So while I was attending Old Dominion University, I ended up meeting, which is, now my ex-wife, but at the time, she was just not the type who wanted to be the naval officer's wife and have me gone 6 months out of the year and things of that nature. So I had to make a life change. And so with that change in gears, I took my love for nutrition and moved it into fitness and sports medicine. American College of Sports Medicine had a very nice lab there at ODU, and they had a program there that would really emphasize sports medicine and things like that. So needless to say, I shifted gears over from that type of world dedicated to the military, and I decided to become a personal trainer and learn more about health and wellness, but also moving into what makes the body work from a physical perspective. And so one of the things about it is that going through that, going back to my mother, is, I had a lot of influence with her because she actually had type 1 diabetes. And this diabetes is what we call an idiopathically induced or a medical error induced diabetes. She, at a younger age, was diagnosed with an infection, and she was actually treated with high doses of steroids, which actually killed her pancreas. So she became a brittle diabetic for the rest of her life, and I saw the struggles that she went through when it comes to that. And then, of of course, as you begin to learn, you start to talk to people in your life about what you're learning versus, what they're doing and pointing out how they should be eating or not. And I'd always say, Mom, I really don't understand how this diet is that you're eating in regards to regulating your blood sugar and insulin, because the pervasive idea at the time was, of course, if your blood sugar drops, you just eat sugar. Didn't really matter what source it was from. Heck, you could just eat honey or drink a Mountain Dew. So the thing about it was, that didn't really set well with me. So I remember early telling my mom, Mom, I just don't think you should adjust it like that. How about you eat food? And then she would tell me, well, life isn't always that easy. And when you're busy and working, it's not that conducive. You got these insulin reactions and so forth. So anyhow, that kind of shaped how I looked at things when I remember hearing for the first time her trying to explain to me that a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. And I just thought, man, that's got to be BS, BS, and BS, because it just doesn't make sense. If you eat a bag of marshmallows, it's not the same thing as if you ate a couple chicken breasts, or if you drink a cup of olive oil. They all have calories, but they just don't have the same metabolic effects in the body. So anyhow, that was one of the big things for me that kind of set me in that challenging the status quo of medical care for disease states when I was younger. And then, of course, another big aspect was I've always loved the martial arts. I remember actually having a school of my own, a martial arts school, where I'd had anytime a couple dozen students or so all wanting to, train together and things of that nature. And actually even watching the UFC 1, if there's any MMA listener enjoyment, people out there like to watch mixed martial arts, that's where that was. So you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But the Ultimate Fighting Championship #1. And this is when a gentleman called Hoist Gracie and those kind of guys came onto the martial arts scene and just shook it up a bunch, like they were Bruce Lee too. But anyhow, so I always had a love for the culture of martial arts, and of course its history going back, and there's a huge component into conditioning the body and eating and health and respect and things like that, and of course ancient healing. So that was another piece of the puzzle for my formative years. Then one of my years when I was in school, I actually got rear-ended right in front of my college, and of course my mom was like, okay, well, for this particular thing, we really can't just rub some butter on it. So she says, well, tell you what, I'm going to take you to my chiropractor. And so I got introduced to my first chiropractor, and I was like a little apprehensive, and I was like, what is this all about? But man, what a huge difference it made for me in the pain that I was having. And they gave me exercises and talked to me about nutrition, and I just loved it. So that was another basic little block in the foundation that I started building into what would become my destiny of working in that type of an approach on the body. So the whole integrative medicine term, was coming into play in the early 1990s, got a lot of prominence and things like that. So I really felt a kinship to the ideals of integrative medicine, and I just knew that was the way to go. So in all of these kind of culminating, by the time life kind of shifted me through those things, I realized that this is where my future had to lie. And it just all made sense to me, something that would combine and embrace multiple disciplines, but be wise enough to know that there is more power in a larger toolbox with multiple methods to approach. I never was one of those individuals who was like, well, drugs are bad and stay away from. I think that they have a very prudent place when it comes to remediating symptoms that we had. But so I decided to go ahead and see if I could get some tours of some hospitals and kind of get a feel for that was. And after walking through the hospital and seeing IVs and the beeping machines beside these people's table and that smell and those robes that only tied in the back, I was just like, this really can't be a place for health. This is disease management. We're really focusing on learning diseases, not really what makes people healthy. It was more of a frame of reference to where people would come once they have troubles, but where is the care that people would need to get? Kind of like this conversation I would have with my mom that would actually say, hey, listen, how do you prevent things? How can you nutrify the body and really support it with the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, like feeding the body and exercising the body and resting the body? So anyhow, after looking at different disciplines, I chose naturopathy as being a starting place for me. And while going through that training, I became aware of something that is actually near and dear to my heart called functional medicine. This was an approach that was coming into view and really gaining some traction again in the early 1990s. And I was able to actually get an internship at a hospital that had a dedicated integrative medicine department. And it was kind of very interesting because I'll never forget that the actual doctor who's the head of pathology would actually come and treat patients with these big acupuncture needles. And I'm not talking about the ones that we use today that are disposable little, filiform needles, one-time use. He actually used these autoclave needles because, of course, he was traditionally trained over in China. And I'm talking, these things are just impressive. They're like 6 to 8 inches long. They're about like 1 millimeter wide and 0.5 millimeter thick. So I just saw him do really cool stuff when it comes to that. I'll never forget this young kid who had this really bad habit of walking on his toes. And the parents were like, wow, what's going on with this? Is there anything you can do? And after a couple series of acupuncture, the kid flattened out his thing. His gait got better, and it was just profound. One of many times that was really impressive to me. So during that time, when I was completing this particular internship, a big conglomerate in the United States came through and decided to buy the hospitals. This was actually a Catholic hospital owned by the nuns. And so when they were doing a review of different departments in the hospital, they found out that, wow, this particular hospital has this integrative medicine department, but we are staunch, traditional, I'll add the term closed-minded, allopathic medicine. So we really don't want that in there. So I looked at this as an opportunity because the docs were like, oh man, what are we going to do with all our patients? And I thought, well, that's kind of great news. And why do we need to do this? And look at it as a bad thing. And so I gathered together these docs, had a big old luncheon, and I basically pitched us all coming together and buying out that department from the hospital. And I was able to actually do that. So me and about 10 other docs got an SBA loan, and we bought the practice, and then we developed that for several years. And that was just a really interesting experience. So we had on staff traditionally trained medical doctors and DOs. We had chiropractors. We had doctors of oriental medicine. We had massage therapy, marriage and family counseling, a medical, we trained, of course, a psychiatrist, but who was also open to other things when it comes to integrative medicine and the involvement of the health of the mind and emotions that is tied to the body. But then, of course, after a few years of that, and as with so many, this was right after 9/11, and a lot of lives changed, including mine. We started to look at the world through a different lens. And I was like, wow, this is a new era that we're going into. And so what I wanted to do is reevaluate my life and say, what is it that will make me happy to really enjoy time with my family and be able to change some lives in my own small way. And of course, having the heart of a healer, I knew it would rely on going into other areas of healing and medicine, if you will. And so I decided I would expand my toolbox of care. And I decided to go back to school again. And this time it was within the realm of Oriental medicine. So fast forwarding, and after becoming a doctor of Oriental medicine, which caused me to move to Florida, complete that. That was almost 10 years ago now. And then with every evolution that we go through, it's interesting what doors are open and people that we get to coordinate different times of our lives with, and learn that, man, isn't it interesting how life is grand enough to set before us different opportunities to embrace. And one of them was I was working with doing a co-care with a compounding pharmacy. And they were, of course, getting into the new thing that was, rocking the United States with Suzanne Summers' book, the Sexy Years and things like that. I believe is the name of the title of it. And so they said, well, you should really go and check out what is called the A4M, or the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And I was like, wow, they would like me to come as their guest and things like that. So that was one of the things that I actually did. I was able to attend that particular meeting out in Las Vegas. Or actually, the first time was actually in Chicago, Illinois. And then, when you go through this week-long conference, you get to take so many different courses, you get a whole bunch of CMEs, and you learn different things. And again, another time where I met so many wonderful doctors who embraced integrative medicine and functional medicine. And I was like, wow, this is a really awesome group of people. So for several years, I, attended those. And after just a few, I was actually invited to become a lecturer and one of their educators at these international conferences. So I got to lecture on topics like nutrition in clinical practice, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, stem cells, detoxification, and systems biology. Just really what I really just salivate thinking about. And I was, of course, able to get in front of just thousands of minds from around the world. These conferences are huge. They usually have about 10 to 15,000 physicians or clinicians there at one particular time. And one of the things after when you're lecturing and teaching new minds is that after you talk and you come down off the stage, they want to talk and different things of that nature, which I really love. And I've had this very interesting phenomenon happen to me over and over each year that I spoke. And of course, this was that so many of today's doctors who were trained for many years and highly competent in the method that they used had been practicing in their fields for decades as well, but still came to this epiphany that what they were doing just wasn't working, and that managed care determined who they saw for how long and what they could actually do. You actually have these limits on what you can do, how you can treat the patient, and of course how you're going to get reimbursed. So we call these HMOs, or I call them health mafia organizations. But under this particular model of disease management, what they're really doing, and they realize this, was they're just applying Band-Aids, so acute care to chronic diseases. So whether you have migraines and they just started a couple weeks ago, you're going to get virtually the exact same treatments and interventions, medically speaking, whereas if you had these migraines for the last 5 years. And we know that just is illogical, but unfortunately they're a byproduct of that environment. So they would tell me over and over that they felt their souls were being sucked out of them, that they were like, man, there's got to be a better way. I'm working all these hours. I'm seeing 10 to 12 patients an hour. We get maybe 4 to 7 minutes with them, and you only get to talk about one complaint. And there's never enough time to talk to them about how they can balance their hormones, how they can alter their diet to best, suit them, and how they can exercise. And quite frankly, it was frustrating. It totally makes sense. So after doing that, they were like, well, there's got to be a better way. So they realized, look, we got into medicine to become healers. And what this meant was to actually heal, not to treat endlessly. So, it was like they knew they were living in the dark ages before the scriptures were actually printed to the masses. and there had been a control on the information. And it's an amazing thing to realize that what you learn after you know it all is what counts. That's what my dad used to teach me. And so they would take notes feverishly and write all these things down and go back to their practices and be pumped and think, well, I'm going to apply these kind of things. Then they'd call me or email me later and go, man, I just don't have the time to do it. And I go, I understand, but there are ways that you can transition from that type of practice into a new one. It just takes a bold approach, and it takes some guts, because you're going to come up against opposition and those who write the checks. So, these questions were all related to how they could take this new view and apply it in their clinical care. And so I found myself amongst the great company of people, searching to do things, but also learning from some of the greats in functional medicine. And I just learned a tremendous amount over those years. And so, I feel extremely fortunate to have been blessed with the road before me. And I've really have come to realize that who my greatest teachers were actually my patients. And of course, down south, we talk about the gift of gab. We like to grab a lemonade and a rocking chair on the porch and just rock a while and talk. So you learn to talk a lot, but you also learn to listen a lot. And so that's the central theme that I knew really has been at the crux of my success with my patients, is actually listening to them, letting them teach me and telling me. Now, in medicine, we kind of have at least for me, I usually, people will say things like, well, when a patient's lying to you when their mouth is moving. And I've always, been like, well, that's probably because they don't have enough trust and rapport in you that you'd actually believe them that something's wrong. You just don't want to, if they feel bad, the answer is an antibiotic, a pain medication, or an antidepressant. That's pretty much the approach. So if they don't feel that they can talk to you, of course, they're not always going to be square with you. But the other thing is that I've realized is that if you take time and you listen to your patients, let them tell you their individual story, you'll actually gain a lot. It's one of my favorite quotes from the father of modern medicine, Sir William Osler, founder of Johns Hopkins Medical University. As he said, it's if you listen to the patient, they will tell you the diagnosis. And another quote of his is, it's more important to know what patient has the disease as opposed to what disease has the patient. And so that has really been what makes me look from this particular paradigm of functional medicine the way that I do. But then, of course, as you learn and implement things that you learn within this systems biology we call functional medicine, you don't always know how to approach it. And so the other thing is an adage is that, men go to the doctor once for their immunizations and a second time for their open heart surgery. But women in general, they go a lot more often. I mean, there's a lot of country music songs written about that. A little cheesy there, but my point is that what ends up happening is that I found that about 70 to 75% of my patient base over the years has, of course, been women. And, of course, having a very strong affinity to my mom and my sisters and being very close to them and being duly deputized to probably be about what I call 30% chick, tuned with my feminine side. I was taught very well, and they said, when we're saying this, we mean this. So, of course, this has been very helpful to me, being a father of 2 daughters. So it is coming quite useful in a personal thing. But my point is that when it comes down to it, patients, if you listen to them and you allow them to teach you as a physician, you will be able to serve them better. I tell my patients all the time, listen, you're the boss. I work for you. And you might not like me, as your consultant telling you, how to do things, but that's what you hire me to do. But at the end of the day, you are in control of your life. And so what I want to do is empower you with as many things that I can to do that. But then what I found is there is a pattern that most clinicians miss. And then, of course, out there in the info space today, and you got all kinds of blogs talking about eat this way, don't eat this way, this is healthy, this is not, low this, high that. And what's missing from all that chaos is the person, you, the patient, your genes, your lifestyle, your environmental inputs, all those things that actually make you a category of one, uniquely you. So I began to study these patterns of what I had to do to resolve these interrelated chronic diseases that were, crossing different systems. How was it that the gastrointestinal system affected the brain, and how did the liver affect the nerves? And it was really amazing to me to see these patterns. So this is where the balance protocol came from. I figured out that there was a approach, a order, if you will, a correct order. There's all these steps and different ways that we can go about working with the patient. But what we really wanted to do is, get the most out of that particular clinic time. And so patients, they want results now. They're in the now business. And they're like, this is why they're like, doc, well, can you give me something for this? And I wish it was that simple. But when it comes down to it, what gets the patient there is the absence of a lot of other things. So I realized there had to be a correct order of approach, regardless of who the patient or what this quote-unquote disease is. So even though we have a systemized approach, there is this subtle art as opposed to just the science. And that art is truly getting things in the right order and seeing the patient in these ways that I've been talking about. So the balance protocol was born, but I always like to be very clear in saying that it wasn't something that I created. It was more that it was observed. So a major difference. So, in this podcast, we're going to dedicate bringing the balance protocol to you. the most important thing, where all care should be centered. I want to encourage as many people as I can, both patients and physicians, to stop doing disease-centered care and have more patient-centered care. We have to study the origins of health, not the origins of disease. It's actually called salutogenesis versus pathogenesis. So this is my personal crusade to empower as many of you as I can with the knowledge to live a life with amazing vitality, and to understand that I actually believe my patients. I listen to them. When they tell me something is wrong, I believe them. We work together to find out how and why, not what. So we talk about how and why medicine, not what medicine. The name of the disease makes no difference to me. I want to know more about the patient and less about this particular named disharmony. I take a huge amount of time to do very similar to what I'm doing now, and that is to tell a story and about the individual, so you will effectually understand more of why they have what they're being affected by at this particular time in their life. And just like I want you to understand why I'm actually doing this podcast and what's going to set it apart from some others that might be able to lend your ear. So I even go so far as when I work with my patients, I actually sit down with them and I say, I want you to tell me your life story. Name everything that's important to you, of course, as it relates to the symptoms that might be bothering you, but tell me about you, where you grew up, what you did, environments that you're in, where you live now, what's your life, how do you eat, what do you eat, where do you sleep, these kind of things, all this exposure type basis things, and basically be like a CSI agent for health, really delving into all the little subtle clues that most would miss. So then what I would say is, after you tell me your story, I'm going to tell you your story back. And when I give your story back, if something is missing or needs to be added or something, if I don't have it correct, I want you to stop me, correct me, and then let us make sure that we know exactly what's going on in your history, like I'm doing their biography. So by hearing their story and giving it back to them, we both begin to speak on the same page. And this is why a time with me in particular is, initially is going to be an hour to 2 hours long. And so this is a very powerful tool, and it is the starting point of the balance protocol. So now that we're both empowered with the same story, I teach my patients a very powerful system that shows simple efforts can afford us the highest levels of well-being, perpetuate longevity, prevent disease, and even resolve. That's right, resolve chronic diseases. I show them at the end of the day, it is them. So I would say you are the person who can make you healthy. Nothing is more fundamental to being happy and fulfilled and productive in life than having and owning your life. So simply, we just can't achieve that very, quested thing. People used to say, at least you have your health. Well, if you don't have your health, what do you have? What lives can you touch? Who in your family can you spend time with and last and things? So that's what I want to get people back to. And so without feeding your body the right foods at the right time for the right person, and actively moving the body, exercising the amount that you particularly need, and of course, getting the adequate amount of rest and sleep that you need. Without those three things, the chance of you being able to live the most abundant life that you can is really going to be a challenge. Some muddle through, and they do great things. However, I want the highest levels. I want optimal health. I want the ultimate levels for my patients. It's the life that I live. I'm blessed to be, no complaints, healthful. I sleep fantastic. I have plenty of energy, as you can probably tell. And I have to listen to a lot of difficult stories as a career. And I take upon myself that role with the ability to donate this energy to my patients and empowerment by making sure that first and foremost, I have mine. So my challenge to all my patients is to, show you how to avoid this chaos, clear out the noise, and teach them how to apply different theories that they see out there and cipher through them for them. because there's no cookie cutter thing. There's no one diet for everybody. There's no one exercise program for everybody. It's not about losing weight. It's about gaining health. And there is a dynamic difference between the two. So what I'd like to do is encourage you to come back to this podcast each visit, learn about how we can bridge the gap between medicine and practice, those that are in the research, and then those that actually are individuals just like yourself. So we want to blend all three of those, get them all on the same page. A little bit big bite to bite off and chew, but I definitely believe we can do it. I've been doing it for many years, and my patients have brought me to an understanding that you absolutely can if there is this powerful relationship between the correct information with the correct patient and the correct physician. So those that are highly motivated about this particular field have a lot to say. We have a lot to share. We just got to bring us all together and get us on the same page. So most important here is that your story is central. That's what I want you to do. Embrace being the power, embrace having the power of being a category of one. Don't settle for being crammed into a box and be stamped on the forehead with some named condition or disease. You can relinquish those things. It's definitely able to be done, but the hard work and the heavy lifting has to come from you. You're truly one of a kind, genetically, environmentally created, and the things that you live in is entirely under your power and the ability to manipulate it. So in essence, I'm going to teach you how to fish, not just give you a fish. And it comes down to this. Here's the Balanced Protocol podcast, where we're going to educate you on the true root causes of disease, motivate you to take solid correction actions in your life, inspire you to reach the highest levels of well-being. So for more information on the Balanced Protocol and functional medicine, please head over to my website. It's DrAnthonyGBeck.com. That's DrAnthonyGBeck.com. DrAnthonyGBeck.com. I look forward to sharing my passion, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next podcast. So remember, let's live life in balance.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. Thank you for listening to the Balanced Protocol podcast. Be sure to head over to DrAnthonyGBeck.com, where you'll find lots of life-changing information that will educate, motivate, and inspire you to your highest levels of well-being. There, you can get access to exclusive content, as well as download your 100% free Urgent Health Report. You can also use the contact page to ask your health questions and make requests for topics you would like covered on future podcasts.